Welcome to the Queer Witch Project, your resource for all things queer and witchy. I am Domino Peacock, a fabulous, neurospicy, non-binary, ordained queerdo with a fascination for all things cycles, symbolism, and patterns.
And I'm Moonkittee, your queer femme, polykitchen witch, and proud geek. Today's topic is queer resistance and resilience. Mm,
And we have a special guest. We have had the special guest before, so definitely not unfamiliar with some of our listeners. And we have wonderful past history with this person, but I didn't prepare a bio. So, Kat, how do you want to be described?
Hi, great. I'm Kathleen. I am a community leader and a parent of multiple queer children. I am also queer myself. I am witchy. I came on a previous episode talking about mindfulness in your arts, and I'm also someone who has deep community roots and has worked in the queer community since I was a child, and now I'm raising kids who are doing it. And so this topic is literally my whole life.
mhm,
Yes, this is a very important topic for us
mhm.
today.
Right.
Mhm.
It's been a couple months since the US election, and I think most of us who are queer or those who follow a non-Christian based spiritual path are really worried about what the next 4 years are going to look like.
And we
Um,
definitely didn't want to not talk about this because
exactly.
it's on all of our minds.
Right. We know that Trump is going to be elected president again, and it's going to be a challenge. So we wanted to have an episode that really focused on resilience and resistance. And with that, the reason for that is again, because I think we need to remember that there are times we can't live in the darkness. We've had our times, we've had our moments to grieve since the election. Now it's time to resist. And now is the time to be resilient and see what can we do to get us through the next 4 years. But to start with that, we thought it might be good to kind of give ourselves a reminder about where we've come from because we've seen over the course of the years, and it feels so overwhelming right now for us. But if you look how far we've come and that whole idea of it does get better, it's really interesting because it has in so many ways.
And it will continue to do so, but me with the fascination of cycles and symbolism
Mm,
and patterns is that throughout my 4 decades and also hyperfixation fascination with history,
hmm
um, you will see this pendulum swing between progress and regress. And I guess that's the best way to put it. And so sometimes when progress is made, there is kickback. It reminds me of a song that I loved as a kid. Yeah, this is like my old country redneck roots, but it's like a one step forward and two steps back. Nobody gets too far like that lyrics.
hmm
But I bring this up because if you look at just queer history and the history of resilience and the fact that we've historically always been here in some way, shape, or form and have often experienced discrimination, and yet we're all still here. And some of us are way too far out there to be put back in Pandora's box. So I think it's really important to remember that the pendulum will swing back.
I absolutely agree. And looking back, we can look back and see that there have been so many shifts in medical advancements and attitudes socially that have shifted so much in the last 3 or 4 decades, 5 decades that we have to think about it. Homosexuality in general hasn't been considered a deviant medical behavior since 1973. Now, for those of us who are in our 40 something, that doesn't seem like that long ago. For a lot of our listeners
Yeah.
that are not, that's really only 50 years.
It makes my heart hurt for anybody who, like the queers of the 1920s and the 30s and
Hmm.
Hmm
they were everywhere, but
Yeah.
so often in underground and secret societies.
Yeah.
That's that time gap specifically is something that I talk about with my children a lot because they come to me and they'll say things like, I don't understand why people still act this way and do these things. And it could be about homosexuality, it could be about racism, but my answer for them is always like, we don't realize how far we've come in such a short amount of time.
Hmm.
Like the amount of progress that has happened so quickly is unfathomable. And so when we're talking about, back in the day when we had these issues with racism and segregation and all of these other discriminatory behaviors, like there are still people alive who remember that, who
Mm-hmm.
lived through
Yeah.
it, and like trying to
Mm-hmm.
explain that to these children who are born in this world who like my kids like laugh at people when they act out like that, and they're literally baffled when they see that hate in the world and don't understand why people are making that choice. And so that's such an incredible thing on its own, that there's been
Yeah.
that much growth in that much time. It's so been so fast.
Hmm.
Often we talk about how the current generation has words for things that we knew but didn't have words for. We didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand fully how to express, but we knew within ourselves. And that's not very many generations from my childhood.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Um, and they're talking about it at a younger age. And some people want to whine and cry and call that indoctrination, but really it's just knowledge is power.
Hmm.
Right.
Absolutely. The one that I think that is also scarier talking about this medical advancement, we'll get into that thing else, is gender identity disorder. So
Mm-hmm.
the trans umbrella, that wasn't removed until 2013.
Yeah.
It was
Mm.
only 10 years ago from now. So it took 40 years
For it to not be seen as an
for not to be
illness.
seen as an illness.
And we're
Um,
still living with the repercussions of that mentality.
exactly. So it's one of those things. It's so far, but over a long period of time. But it's something that
Mm-hmm.
again is it's such a challenge. But with
You
that,
talk about medical advancements within the queer and under the queer umbrella community, but I think about when AIDS was first on the scene,
hmm
Mm-hmm.
or even when it was called GERDS, which was gay immune.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember exactly, but anyways, it was the gay disease, and the response to it, the public response to it was horrendous and not productive at first because it wasn't a demographic that people wanted to care all that much about. It stigmatized a lot of um, even like I remember going through as a child being educated about it and
Mm-hmm.
how scary you know, just they made sex in general because of this thing that was out there to kill you if you have sex because it's dirty and
Mm-hmm.
it was just so much stigma and yet after all these years it's no longer a death sentence
Yeah.
and they have made so many medical advancements that even people who have HIV can take a lot of preventative measures like PrEP and other things out there to
Mm-hmm.
ensure that it doesn't get spread.
Yeah. And kind of just hinging off of that a little bit too, the AIDS epidemic was, in some ways it was a silent genocide. Like not only did it just kill so many gay people, but it reduced the amount of medical care that so many queer people got in general and forced so many people back into the closet.
hmm
And historically that's happened to us a lot, right? Like we see it again and again. It happened in the Holocaust. But the thing that is happening is every time we're coming back and we're coming back stronger and healthier and in greater numbers. And so, like, talking about how the AIDS epidemic wasn't that long ago, and we lost thousands and thousands and thousands of queer lives, and now we're recovering from that. Life is coming back to the ecosystem, as it were, and it's in our families. So, like, the continued growth of our community as a whole from these horrible things where people are trying to eradicate us and can't.
It
hmm
reminds me of a terrible movie quote, Life finds a way.
It's
But anyway,
okay. No, the point that I was getting at is that like we've lived through so many horrible things that are trying to eradicate us. And we keep coming back stronger with more community and with better supplies than we ever did before.
Like cockroaches and Twinkies.
Right? Like, I
I
mean, we
I don't,
love the trash animals, don't we? Like
yes,
raccoons, possums, that's our
Yep.
thing because they survive and they get through everything and they
Because we
thrive and you can't
punk.
stop them. What?
Yeah. Because they're punk.
and speaking of something else, again, as we've kind of transitioned through AIDS and the AIDS
Hmm.
epidemic and the medical processes, we've also watched society itself shift
Mm-hmm.
into acceptances of LGBTQIA plus folk.
Hmm.
And that was one of the things I thought was very interesting is even here in our California bubble, as we like to say, but also as the rest of the world likes to say about us, our liberal snowflake bubble here.
Hmm.
I have comments about that, but I'm not going to share them. It's one of those things that even here in California, it wasn't until 2008, 2009. So in 2008, in California, we had this ballot measure called Proposition 8, which wanted it to constitutionally say that marriage is between a man and a woman. And
No
it,
hate.
yeah, the no
That was
hate,
the
but
no
also
hate on it.
the
Yeah,
no
no on
hate on
hate.
8. But Prop 8 passed in
Yeah,
2008 in California by a
yeah.
very narrow margin, and that's 15 years ago. So
I
this is
was
Mm-hmm.
getting
gutted.
close. Yeah. Oh, so yeah,
Yeah,
completely.
same.
Completely. It passed
Mm-hmm.
by a narrow margin. However, California Supreme Court immediately jumped on it,
Hmm.
and it was overturned in
It was
2010
unconstitutional.
because that was considered unconstitutional. And
Hmm.
after they had to go again, there's always appeal processes that happen, but it was legalized. Same-sex marriage was legalized in California in 2013.
Hmm.
So during that period of time, once it was overturned, marriages started, and by 2013 in California, 10 years ago, it was completely legal for LGBTQ same-sex marriage
I
in
believe it's
California.
constitutionally protected now on the California Constitution.
But yes, and that in 2015, that's when the Supreme Court,
Hmm.
the case Oberfell versus Hodges, which is again a high point and a very big sticking point. That's the case that federally allowed
Mm-hmm.
legalized same-sex marriage in all states and
Hmm.
required that if you are married in one state and you move to another state, you are legally that state is legally obligated to respect your marriage
Mm-hmm.
status. So I know that's a big one that a lot of us are worried about going forward with this next administration. If Roe
Hmm.
versus Wade could get overturned, can Oberfell? And that's a big question that we don't know what's going to happen. Um, but we do know that even in smaller situations and as the smaller states and as states in general are ramping up for this in 2024 in the 2024 election, one of the things that kind of went unnoticed but was really important here is several states, and I want to say 5 to 7, and it could be even more
Hmm.
than that, actually passed legislative requirements that remove the phrase marriages between a man and a woman from their state constitutions.
Hmm.
So even if it happens that if you're in one of those states, California being one of them, that even if it gets legalized and overturned and goes back to the states, it is no longer in the state constitution that marriage is between a man and a woman. So it is federally, you are protected in that way. So
Hmm.
there are, again, slow things that happen, but
Yeah,
change is
not to
still
say
happening.
that, queer marriage is the most important topic or, the
No.
most
Hmm.
important, thing that we need to be talking about, but it is a very good example of how things can go from better to, repealing to this to that and that. We move forward by not giving up ground, not giving up the fight, not giving up what we know is
Yeah.
constitutionally right, that, every human on this earth, regardless of who we love and how we express ourselves, we
Hmm.
deserve humane treatment.
Hmm.
Yeah. And I think like in that situation too, it's also important to think about the fact that that legislation is there to protect us in the future. It is there to protect our constitutional rights because with everything that's going on everywhere in the world and the way we're having this look at the US government and the way it's treating its people, it's so easy to feel like they're just going to hunt us down and be horrible. And we need to remember that there are people like us that are working in the government and working to protect all of us, and that work is doing something, and it's happening in bigger ways all the time. And the fact that we're getting those protections in on the cusp of what is some of our, our nightmares coming true is due to the hard work of other people, saying that they aren't going to let it get worse if they can help it.
And that kind of leads us into one of the things that we want to caveat by saying we are actually recording this episode at the end of November, beginning of December, and we know there is a huge case that's going to be seen by the U.S. Supreme Court, the U.S. versus Scarmetti, which is a case challenging the court decision that gave the 14th Amendment federal rights and protections for transgender people. And if that's overturned, that it would send it back to the states, which could potentially legalize discrimination against trans people again. And that's something I know we don't want to talk about that too much because we know that's something that's we don't know the answer to where we're at
Mhm.
with that right now. But with that being said, what can we do if this does get overturned? How can we act?
Mhm. So I'm going to kind of jump in here on that. And to start with, I'm going to talk a little bit about where I come from on these things. Because like the best way I can sum it up is, and I'm sorry, I'm going to keep talking about my kids in this because they're such a part of the issue for me. You know, they're queer, they're my
Yep.
future, like all of that.
You are the
Um,
re that is why we knew that you were the right person to talk to about this because you are
yeah,
in that position of passion where there's people that
thank you.
you can't love anything more than your kids, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
Like and want the
yeah.
best for them and I know that how
Mhm.
much you care. I know how much you
Yeah,
care.
but the election or voting day happened, and in the car on the way to take my youngest kid to school, I knew I had to talk with them about it because they were going to talk about it at school, and like really started having a problem with it and having an emotional reaction. And what are we going to do? How are we going to stop people from being horrible? And I was like, baby, we're already stopping from being horrible. Like, let me tell you, because activism has been a core like feature of our family since, I mean, since before my children were born. I've been an activist pretty much as soon as I could independently go out. So I mean, I started the first GSA in Placer County, which, oh, sorry if that was location. Um, but I started the first GSA at my school, and that meant taking it as far up as like fighting federal funding with the schools. And so I just turned around to my kid and I was like, we've been fighting. And so we talked about like, they've got a little denim battle vest. We're a pretty punk rock family. And I was like, this pin and this patch and this thing on your vest came from this event that we go to. And it's the Anarchist Book Club. And I said, we got all those things. And at the end of the day, the money from those things freed a Honduras immigrant from ICE detention, a whole human.
Hmm.
So, so this is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to keep doing. And my kid found that very comforting. Being in the activism community as long as I had, I know a lot of us are exhausted of this fight, and I hear it from my peers and my friends a lot. We hit this wall and they go, how do you start feeling better in like living in all of this? And my response has always just been to turn to whatever form of community you have. And in some instances, that's like your direct family. And in some instances, that's going out and finding a community area for that. And community is going to be such an integral part of the next few steps and the next few years of our life.
I
Uh,
back that up 100%. I feel like one of my responses to everything that's happened is that I have to love harder.
mhm,
I can't
yeah,
do it quietly.
yep,
I mean, we're us here on this podcast are
right.
out there on the internet at our ages, like
Mhm,
we're out of Pandora's box. We're not going back in, and not everybody can do this. I recognize
yeah.
that. I'm very privileged in the fact that I live in a blue bubble, as they call
Mhm,
it, and I can be who I am and proud and I can bear a torch and light the way and I'll
mhm.
if they're gonna burn me at the stake, I'll go singing.
Right. And yeah, we talk about that a lot in my family because there is the fear response of like, I don't know if the viewers can see, like I have the shaved head, and like we've talked about, like, do I need to grow my hair out? But also I have a mixed ethnicity family. I have brown kids. And
Hmm.
so I have to always be aware that like they can't hide. And so instead
Yeah.
of just preparing and comforting fears, becoming a big proponent of what's out there in the community.
Well, I feel like we have to talk to people and humanize ourselves to people
Absolutely.
I am a deeply caring individual, and I deeply am grateful for the community that I have and that we've
Mhm.
built and that we've found and that we've forged, and that's a constant exploration, and I one I encourage people into, and to never give up, constantly
Mhm.
seeking who your people are, because that's, like you said, foundational to what's going to get us through
Yeah.
these days.
And I'm gonna try and not get too like doomer on this, but I'm strongly passionate about the idea that right now is the time to be making in-person community.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that's how we're going to be affecting change, and that's how we're going to be protecting each other. And I mean, I do mean your friends that you want to sit on the couch with, but I also mean your neighbor, because we just saw
Right,
natural disasters happen all over the country where people were
right.
trapped and didn't have food or clean air. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and being prepared for that means showing up and talking to the people around you and finding a safe way to
Mm-hmm.
do that. I was talking to someone the other day about how our generation is like the only generation that saw that magical 8-year gap where the internet was actually free information. And then with the way AI has taken over and the way everything is being filtered and monitored, there was a freedom of information and exchange that we all got really used to that's disappearing and not as safe as it used to be. But like counterpoint to that again, I guess, is that there are also parts of our community that are raising up and meeting that. One of my favorite things that I'm starting to see in a lot more queer resource websites is the emergency 3-click, like the Trevor Project. If you
Hmm.
go on their website, which is an amazing resource that every queer person should always look at, top to bottom. But they have, even on their mobile device, if you tap 3 times, it immediately shuts down and goes to Google. So they're literally trying to set up, even in a situation where information might be hard to find, they're trying to make it as safe as possible. Um, I sent Damona a list that I wanted to have linked on the comments too. It was a
Mm-hmm.
list of 100 resources for queers in all 50 states. And they were community organizations. Some of them are, small. Like there was one I had written down that worked in specifically like Atlanta, and there are some that are statewide, and there are these
Yeah.
pockets of communities that are there that
Look for yours.
it's time for us to become a part of it.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And all of our issues, and I mean this as a human race, are so interconnected that
Mm-hmm.
it's going to feel overwhelming to pick one,
Yeah.
but you don't have to, because they all do. They're all a piece of the puzzle. So I personally, I love working with NorCal Resist just because of the convenience for me. Like I love the transparency of it. They work for causes that I am passionate about. They are strongly supportive in my community. And I can show up I don't have to plan. I can just go. It's very convenient. It's very easy to me. Um, and there are days where I feel bad that is more like immigration and community based and not more queer based. But at the
Mm-hmm.
end of the day, helping those parts of my community
Mm-hmm.
is helping the rest of the queer
Hmm.
community. It
Mm-hmm.
is helping, allocate the resources to the right places and helping humanity as a whole.
And
So
showing that
finding,
we care about humanity as a whole, not just
mhm,
about we care about everybody,
yes,
but
Hmm.
we also deserve
exactly.
a seat at that table. That we
And
all need to be caring about each other, no matter how we're identified.
And these community spaces, not only are they doing actual good, like real and actual tangible good. Again, like NorCal Resist sets up every other week and they just distribute food and diapers. They fix headlights for free.
Mm-hmm.
They have lawyers that will just sit there. These are people who are changing people's lives on a daily level. And like, you can go there with your kids, or you can go there by yourself. And a scary thing is all of a sudden safe and you see other people who
Mm.
care like you. And that helps drive that motivation to continue forward, which I know is something that we're all lacking right now
Hmm.
in the face of everything going on. Like that need to get up again is so daunting. And finding these community spaces where you're attached to it for whatever reason it might be helps us get up again, and it helps us keep going. And then we end up being the person who's doing that for someone else. Um, and like I know I told the story about the getting the one immigrant from detention, and I know it's only one person, but I think about that so much because I didn't go to that book fair to do like I went there to support because I want to, but I went there to fill my heart and fill my sense of community and see other people around me who cared about the things that I cared about, who were listening and who were in tuned and doing the same work, and just be amongst that and let it bolster my
it,
spirits. And then
it
I
gives
just
you
also got to save someone from detention by buying my kids some patches and pins. Like
yeah, it
peak.
really gives you hope for humanity when you're in it, when you
Yeah.
go out in it. Sometimes the internet is not the best face of humanity. It's got definitely a darkness to it. Now it also has, you know, a brilliant exchange of information and inspiration, and it makes our world a little smaller because we can know what's actually going on around the world because
Hmm.
of some of the internet access we have, and as controlled as it can be and as monitored as it is, at least here we still have some freedoms
Hmm.
around all that, but it's definitely a double-edged sword. I wanted to ask you
But
though, I want
yeah.
to ask, maybe including the internet, what are something for people who can't go out in the community who have like maybe accessibility struggles, what can be
Mhm.
done?
I think there's something like when we're talking about how media is shifting, and I know I'm the one who said it that like media is becoming more dangerous, and it is. And Damona had briefly like touched on it's hard to interact with all of the darkness in the media that we're seeing because we're seeing it on such a greater level. Um, I so strongly believe that that is a historical change in where we're at with people as a whole and the changes that are happening. Like yes, we are interacting with horrible things that nobody should have to see, and it changes our entire nervous system, but it also is changing the way we are looking at the rest of the world and interacting with it. And I mean, I think the Palestine
Hmm.
uh situation, horrible war, I don't even know what to call it at this point, is such a like great example of that because it was happening again for so many more years than America was paying attention to, or the average American was paying attention to. And now we're saving people all the time, and we're doing it by interacting on a communal level with media. And it reminds me of when we talked about how taking cameras to Vietnam changed what how we thought of war,
Hmm.
Right.
and that same thing is happening right now.
Absolutely. And the other thing is the corporate conglomerate majority rich, oligarchy
Hmm.
don't no longer have, as much thought control over us, unless you're indoctrinated into their religions and engaging in that brainwashing, but that's a whole other
Hmm.
rant. But
Hmm.
when the report people who are reporting on the ground what's happening are the ones that's living and surviving through it,
Hmm.
and you can access that information on your own without going through what the news media is willing. And I'm not like one to be like "Rah, rah, 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 fake news," because that's such a stupid, like not all media is, it's all going to be biased in one way or another, so it's not great.
Hmm.
And what is great is the internet gives us access to real life, what's actually
Hmm.
happening. Now, are there going to be bad players out there taking advantage of that? Yes, you have to use discernment and some wisdom, and not everybody's granted that early in life. And so sometimes, like the tools in the hands
Hmm.
are, you don't know the power that you have. So I know the internet can definitely, and technology access can be vilified for our kids these days, but also you have to see, like again, like in the Swords of Tarot, it is a double-edged sword. It is providing so much advancement in, humanizing people from all
Hmm.
around the world.
Hmm.
Um, but so it also gives us access to community and tools that, maybe people who don't have physical ability to show up somewhere.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend for people like that who don't have a lot of free time, or transportation struggles, or even just financial struggles,
Hmm.
or just ability access? What else could be done if you're
Yeah,
people who want to do something?
absolutely. One of the things that I really like try and focus on in my life as a whole, and I apply this concept whether it's like cleaning my house or my own mental work, and definitely to my activism, is it's about momentum and not necessarily like markable progress. And it's so some days, like for people who are dynamically abled, some days that's going to mean you can go out and do something, and some days that means you can't. And so on the days that you can't, but you want to do something, I think that is either going to mean taking care of or showing love and appreciation to somebody in the community who's
And or
helping, like,
yourself.
and or yourself. I was going to be my other part to that is like it
Oh,
could be that's the sign that it's time to take care of you. But there's also just going to be I don't think there's enough conversations being had yet about the disabled community and their need to constantly like prove their worth in a community to be taken care of. And we have such an overlap in the witchy and queer community with the disabled community. So it's really important to address that.
yep.
And so yes, absolutely take care of yourself. But some people, yeah, they can't go out, they can't go buy things, they can't go be a part of the boots on the ground. So there are some really important resources that I have for that. One of them is
Yay.
actually just a good one for everyone to know. There is a whole system dedicated to conflict resolution and community resource help that doesn't
Mhm.
involve the police. And so you can start using that to help others instead of calling the police and escalating the situation. And it's really easy to remember. It's called don'tcallthepolice.com.
Yay.
Really easy to remember. Yeah. In my house, again, because we have mixed races, we talk about how, as white people, one of our jobs is to make sure that nobody can do harm to people of color around us. And sometimes that means I stand there and I mean mug someone. And so sometimes if your energy can't be spent out at a protest, it can be spent making a space safe and not
Mm-hmm.
allowing that hate to go any further.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then the last one I have, kind of the bummer one, I'm not gonna lie, um, is being the phone calls and the letters.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I know that that is hard for all of us to do for so many different reasons, but I was
Yes.
listening to another podcast called It Could Happen Here, which is run by queer people and also talks about, how we're going to live in this world. And one of them made this incredible point of these politicians are not people. They're not real people. They don't interact with real people.
Mm-hmm.
Trans people and queer people, specifically trans people, make up 1% of the population. And so if someone who is out of touch with reality is looking at a host of issues and a 1% populace is losing out, but the rest of the majority of the people are fine, it's going to keep being okay to say no to that 1%. So we have to be loud. We have to make sure they know we're here. We have to
Yeah.
call and tell them it's not okay. We have to. Um,
You can sign
and
petitions online is, another thing along those lines. But
mhm,
somebody was telling me today that um, she and her partner have talked about making those phone calls and writing those letters
yeah,
because that's what other people were doing. That's what the other
yeah,
side is doing. They are humanizing their cause. They are reaching out to people.
mhm,
And we all need to be doing that because we are people too. And we need to humanize,
mhm,
let people know that, like, I am a human who feels love in this world and I
mhm,
deserve to, serve my community and offer that love. And I'm no less than any of you, and I'm no
yeah,
more. We're all in this together. And
mhm,
that's definitely the, inclusive mentality I've always felt, especially when it comes to
yeah,
Alphabet Mafia or the, different flavors that end up under the umbrella with us. And I'm like,
mhm,
you were talking about trans people being 1%. That's why we bring them under the umbrella with us. This is why I don't
mhm,
believe in exclusivity under
Hmm.
this the queer umbrella because we're better at in larger groups because
Mhm.
we have to not let them take away our humanity.
Right.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
from a witchy perspective, because
Hmm.
we're not just queer, this we are
Right,
also in that
right.
witchy perspective in there too. There is so much that we can do to help with the energy work, the manifestation, um, the work we do with our deities, the work we do together, or even singly in your own practice. All of those things that you can do in your own, you can set up an altar to focusing on resilience and resistance. You can
Hmm.
take those herbs that we know. You can take the grounding things. You can look at the cutting and clearing. You can look at that space and create
Stick the
magically a
pins
safe
in the
space.
Cheetos.
Yes, but there's so much things you can do energetically to also boost that. So if you are unable to get out, but you can do something magically internal, that little bit of energy is same thing. It's that little bit that's going into the bigger cause that causes
Hmm.
the
Yeah,
movement forward.
absolutely. And kind of hinging off of that, the energy and the movement of it, whether it's working with my own craft or my own day-to-day life things, one of the other things that I'm doing to change the way that I'm affecting change when I don't have a lot of resources is being so intentional about not just the ways that I spend money, but like where those go. And so we saw a
Hmm.
lot of financial boycotts, which can be hard for people on lower income because a lot of the things that are financially boycotted are things that are accessible either for neurodivergence or for ease or for budget. And so taking a lot of intent and direction in how I interact with items out in the world. And so if I'm buying things for my practice, I'm not going to buy it from a box store. And that might mean that I'm waiting a little bit longer, but I'm going to make sure I'm buying it from another practitioner, preferably a person of color, who's told me where their sources are or something like that. And taking that extra minute of emotional and mental labor to make sure that even though what I have right now is $5 and what I need is a couple glass beads, that it's going to the right source.
Hmm.
And I'm doing that down to a level of like for Christmas and birthdays and stuff, like whatever things I can sub out. Like I got my partner a necklace and I made sure that the chain I got was from Wear the Peace. So it was also a meal that was going to the children of Kaza and just using a lot of that intentionality where we have it to keep our energy rolling forward with momentum.
Awesome. And I think that's a really great point to kind of wrap up and really say that ultimately we acknowledge that we are in this location here in California
Hmm.
that allows us the privilege to stand our ground and to speak out
Hmm.
and to use those resources that we have. And for those who feel the need to go underground for whatever reason, we see you. We see you and we
Hmm.
respect your decision. And remember that there were several underground movements that absolutely changed history
Hmm.
because resistance is never just one thing at all.
Yeah. And it's not futile either.
Exactly.
Stay resilient, be rebellious, keep that resistance up. Don't give up. We're not giving up ground. You have to take care of yourself. We're out here and we've got you
Hmm.
as best we can for as long as we can. Well, thank you for tuning in and listening to the Queer Witch Project. If you like what you hear, go ahead and give us a follow, some thumbs up or some stars, comments. We love hearing from you. Tell us what you think.
Hmm. And if there is a topic you want to know more about or an episode topic you'd like to suggest, contact us at thequeerwitchproject@gmail.com or find us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram with the handle at Queer Witch Project. We upload every other week. And remember, queerness is a key to magic, so is resistance.
Be yourself and love rebelliously.
Bye.
Bye.